Hi everyone. I am so thrilled because I have an amazing person here with me today who has an incredible story. Delicia Watts, she's somebody I've been working with since April, I think, right? Delicia, April or May?
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
around there.
Yes, and Delicia first came to me because we're working helping her daughter. But when Delicia shared her story with me, I thought, oh my God, this is such an incredible story that can bring so much insight for parents and caregivers in understanding what our children are going through, right? So I work with parents of kids who are sensitive children. And I think very rare we get an insight to understand what the coping mechanism is for those children and how hard it is to cope with the world around them, but also how things can shift when you have like a caring and loving caregiver who supports the children in the way that they need to be supported. Then you can watch our children just bloom and grow and do amazing things. But I want to hear from Delicia because she has an incredible story. So, Delicia, if you want to introduce yourself and share whatever you want to share, and then I might ask you questions throughout this time together.
Okay, so I live in the United Kingdom and I used to have selective mutism. So for anyone that doesn't know what that is, I'll just give you like a brief explanation. So selective mutism, it's a anxiety disorder characterized by a child or adult's inability to speak in certain social situations. So, for example, um, you might be talkative at home with people that you're comfortable with and that you trust, but at school you might be silent in the classroom. So
Yes,
that was my experience.
yes. And Delicia actually just shared with me, which I didn't know, that this month is a Selective Mutism Awareness Month. So I think it's
Yes.
incredible that you can share the story. So, Delisa, I remember the first time we talked, you said that up to the age of 6 or 7, you were fine, you were engaging with people, you weren't necessarily feeling challenged, right? And then things kind of changed around that time.
Yeah, it was around 6. So I was supposed to start school at 5, but my mum kept me home and she homeschooled me until 6. And then I went to school. And I think that's where everything changed when I was in the school environment. So at home, where I spent most of my time up to 6, I was fine. I was talking with my mum and my brothers and sisters, and it was, it was great. But then when I went to school, it was like I couldn't express myself in the same way, and I just was quiet. So, and everyone around me, like people say, oh, she's shy. And, so it was kind of very cute. People would see me and would be like, oh, she's so shy. Isn't that sweet? And I didn't think anything of it because of my age and because I was so young. So I just kind of thought, oh, I'm shy. It's fine.
Yes, and it's so interesting because sometimes as caregivers, we don't realize how children respond differently to stress, right? So what might have been fine for one child starting school, for another child might have been quite a bit, right? So
Yes.
did you find that that's where your stress started and the anxiety started, was when you were starting school?
Um, I don't know if I felt anxiety. Like I didn't know what the word was or the feeling was. So, and I think my recollections so early on wasn't a feeling, it was just I didn't speak in class. And for me, that was okay. But for the, some of the I remember being around 7, and the teacher from the class I was in, he um he told me off because he asked me a question and I didn't reply. Any question that was asked to me, I didn't respond in class. So because I didn't respond, he sent me to stand by the wall, as a punishment for not replying. So, and at exactly the same time, there was another boy who was really talkative and he would not stop talking. And the teacher would say, "Can you stop talking, please?" And he would just carry on talking. And he also got sent to stand next to me by the same wall. And so that was his punishment. So I was quite confused at an early age. It was like the mixed message of, you know, you're asking one child to be silent, like I'm doing, yet I'm being punished for doing the thing you want that child to do. So that, I think that is where I think the confusion began for me. Like I didn't understand that.
Wow. And then when that teacher would send you guys to the wall, what would you do? Like you would just be facing the wall or?
You just be facing the wall and you just stand there until the teacher said you can come back into participate in class.
Yeah. Do you remember how it felt to be asked to do that?
Um, I was literally confused. I mean, I may have been about 7, but what we were speaking about before, where it's like, well, why am I standing next to the wall, next to this child who's doesn't stop talking? And that was, I just was confused. And I just remember that so clearly, that confusion.
Yes. Yeah. And so then what happened after that as you continue in elementary school? What we call in the US elementary school. How do you call it in the
Like
UK?
primary school.
Primary school, yes. So how did it go with the next few months and years in primary school for you?
Well, in primary school there was a bit of bullying going on, I think, because I was so quiet. So that was kind of going on in the background. So the teachers didn't like do anything about it. Um, but they were kind of aware that I was quiet, but I wasn't aware that they were aware. Because at that point I wasn't reading my reports. I later found out kind of when I was older and coming across old school reports that they would write, that I wasn't speaking in class, and so it was, they weren't noting it, but it was just, they just thought I was shy and, I would kind of grow out of it.
Yes. And did you enjoy being at school at that time, or did it feel stressful or being around? How was it for you at that time?
Um, I mean, it was kind of like having two lives, so I'd go to school, I'd be quiet, like had this one friend. So when we went to the playground, I could speak to her and we would kind of walk around, just the two of us, and I would speak to her. And then when playtime was over, I would go into the classroom and I would just be silent. So, and when I was at home, I'd be, very loud, very kind of talkative with my family. Then when I went back to school, I'd be silent. So I didn't really notice it was kind of like a part of my life, kind of this. I didn't know there was anything wrong. I kind of had the best of both worlds in terms of, I had the ability to speak, and at school I didn't speak, so I didn't know what that was about. That it wasn't, I didn't notice that I was different to other children. So I think that was fine because I didn't notice the difference. And my mum always used to tell me, well, you will talk when you're ready to talk. Don't worry about it. When you're ready, you will speak to people. So that was the constant message that I received. So as I kind of got older, it was always in my mind that it was fine. And at that point, people still thought I was in that age group where it's like, oh, she's still kind of shy, and that was, no one made a big deal out of it because it's like, oh, she'll grow out a bit. So I was in that phase. So no one was kind of really focusing in on me when I was younger.
Yes, yes. And then at some point, the school started intervening and actually starting to put labels, and tell us about that.
Yes. So when I moved to secondary school, that's when, so I was about 11, you moved to secondary school. So that's when the problems for me really began. Because before, up until that point, I was kind of told off a few times in class for being silent. There was the bullying going on, but I didn't feel that people were making a massive deal out of my silence in class. So it's only when I went to secondary school that all kind of changed. So it was very strange because it was like the bullying stopped. The kids were fine with me, they accepted me. But it was the teachers that had the problem with me. So they would constantly be, saying, why isn't she speaking? Making a big deal of it. Um, so I would work really hard on my homework to make sure I got A's in everything. I'd spend extra time on it. And even though it didn't matter however much time I spent on it, however many A's I got, it made no difference to teachers kind of pointing out, like, oh, she's not speaking. Why isn't she speaking? And she's not talking in class discussions. And it was when you have that for like a few years, that really kind of like affects you because you just can't get away from it. And the pressure was just building and building and building because everyone was like, it was like all eyes were on you. And it doesn't matter how academically bright you are, how brilliant you do your homework, it makes no difference because they will always go back to, she's not speaking. Why isn't she speaking? She should be speaking because everyone else is speaking. So there was just no understanding of the disorder that I had. And, even at that point, I didn't know that I had anything. So to me, everything I did just felt natural. That was me. So in every kind of moment of me having selective mutism, I always accepted where I was in that space and accepted this is who I am. I can't be like these other children who are really talkative and they can shout in class and they can answer questions. That just wasn't me. And my mum would always tell me, you will speak when you're ready to speak. So I always held that in my mind. But it just, for me, it slowly got worse. The pressure got higher and higher. I used to pretend that I was ill just so I didn't have to go to school because it just became so much that I physically had to force myself to go to school because that's how kind of bad it became.
Mhm. And at that point, you're 11 years old.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So there are a few things here. The pressure, right? And you also mentioned maybe a lack of acceptance of what was happening and a lack of
yes.
understanding, like a deep lack of understanding. Yes. Um, so then what happened from there?
So from there, I basically I couldn't go to school anymore. It was like one day I was working on my homework and something just kind of snapped, and I thought, I can't do this. Like, I was just so unhappy going to school, facing it like every day, and you'd have the comments, or being in class and the teacher picking on you to say, what's the answer to this? And I'm just frozen with anxiety and I can't respond. And to have that like day after day after day, and it just became so much. I remember I was doing my homework and I was like mid sentence, and I just remember just shutting my books and then putting them in the cupboard and shutting the door. And it was like I knew from that moment I cannot go back to this school. So I was 13 years old at that point. So, and obviously, when you stop going to school, that kind of causes a lot more problems that, well, when you're 13, you really don't see what's going to happen, but it kind of triggers off a whole system. So, what happened from there, the deputy headmaster, because he had noticed that I wasn't speaking and he thought there was, basically something very seriously wrong with me. So he kind of wrote a letter to, I think it was the social services, and said, in my 25 years experience, I've never seen a child, you know, like this. And um, there's basically, he was saying there was something wrong with me, and that, something needed to be done, and it had gone beyond, not going to school. So the issues were not about school anymore. He thought I had some kind of psychological issues that needed to be dealt with, and it was like very serious, and everyone has to pay attention to this. So after he wrote that letter, because it was like a few months, no one really notices you're out of the system, and then it was like social services became involved. And yeah, that was, I think, when that happened, I think that was kind of like the worst time of my childhood.
Yes, yes. Um, and I imagine the pressure was even higher now because now you're probably having to prove yourself or prove that you're okay and that your family is okay. Did you feel even more pressure once social service got involved?
Um, well, yes, when they got involved, there's like, a lot of meetings, and they want you to go to um like counseling sessions and meet with you. And the fact was, when I met with them, I couldn't speak to them. And then that was where alarm bells are ringing in their head even louder. So, at that point, I became, a problem. They didn't know what was actually wrong. They literally had no idea, but they wanted to like um take me away from my mum and put me in a psychiatric hospital to, work out what is going on with this, strange child that doesn't speak. But they had no idea it was selective mutism, because back then it was not a well-known disorder. Not a lot of people not a lot of professionals knew about it. And so the way I was treated was totally inappropriate to the disorder that I had.
Yes, yes. So what would you say now? And I do want to get to when you actually eventually started talking, the amazing transformation you went through. But before we even get there, so let's say we have caregivers, teachers, aides now listening to this who actually have a child who they might thinking, oh, maybe this child has selective mutism, or maybe the child has a different diagnosis and they're not performing to the degree that the caregivers and teachers expect. What's something you would want to say to them? Something that would have helped you back then when you were 11, 12, 13, 14, that you would want those people to know now? And I actually believe that probably the headmaster at your school and the teacher, they were probably very well-meaning adults that didn't know how to help you. So I think the more that we can bring this awareness and share what could help a child in that situation, and educate people, the more we can actually impact the lives of children who might be going through this, right?
Yes. So I think I'd firstly say that like selective mutism is not a choice. So it's not that you don't want to speak, it's just that you can't speak, like due to the anxiety, and you just basically just shut down and you can't speak. So with the social workers that got involved in my case, they thought that, I was doing this deliberately. They said that I was like manipulative and powerful, and, that I was deliberately not speaking, which for me was like, this is just, how I am. So I think that would be the first thing is it's not a choice. And also when you're not speaking, I noticed that a lot of professionals, for me, it was like social workers or people just in general that are around you, they actually will speak about you in front of you. And so it's like, I understand everything that is going on around me. I understand what they're saying, but it's like adults will speak in front of children like they're not there, and they will say things about the child with them being present. And I was, kind of hearing, all of it. So that's another thing that, if a child isn't speaking, it doesn't mean that they don't understand what is going on and they're listening. So that's really important, because I was in situations where I would have like social workers talking around me, but I could understand, or they would speak to me, but very slowly, like I didn't understand what they were saying. And I was thinking, why are you speaking to me like that? But I couldn't say to them, why are you speaking so slowly? Like, I can understand you. It's just I don't speak. So yeah, that's
That is huge. Oh my gosh, there are so many huge, amazing things that you're saying. I just want to go back to the first point, which is like all that pressure that you were feeling and how that hugely impacted, like how you were able to perform and show up. And but then the second piece where we think our children are not understanding, and they are, but also the piece where you said, so when a child or an adult is in fight or flight mode and they're not feeling safe, they basically cannot perform and deliver to the degree that the adults in their lives are expecting them to do. And so often I hear parents, caregivers, very loving parents and caregivers, but sometimes they are stressed and they say, oh, my child is just defiant. My child just doesn't want to do this. My child is just button pushing. And though there are times that kids are button pushing, most of the time, if your child is struggling, they are not going to be able to perform to the degree that we're expecting them to. And different children respond to stress differently, right? So in your case, you were completely shut down. And maybe another child in that situation, they might have responded. So we also have to understand that every child is doing the best that they can with their coping mechanisms. They're different, right? We have different coping mechanisms. So what might be stressful for one child is completely different for another child. Is
Yes,
there
even within
yeah.
selective mutism, it's like the rules are different for every child, every situation, every person. So it's, some people, like some children can nod or others can't, or some children can say a couple of words and some can't. So there were different levels, but it is different for each child or
Yes.
adult with selective mutism. So no two are the same.
And also depending on the settings and the situation, because like at
Yes.
home, you were able to have conversation even when you were with a group of people. And I'm working with a family currently whose son was fully potty trained at home, but at school he's having accidents, and they like, well, he probably doesn't care, or he's probably too distracted. Well, it's a different setting, right? And he's doing the best that he can, but he's dealing with a completely different setting with different stressors, with different dynamics in that environment. Yes, but let's go back to you. Anything else that you think would be important for caregivers and parents of children that might be presenting similar situation or actually different, but who are sensitive?
Yeah, I think you need to have an acceptance of where your child is in that moment in time. And it's having that acceptance and saying it's okay and telling them they're okay. So that's what my mum gave to me by saying it's fine, you will talk when you're ready to talk. So, and just also taking off any kind of pressure to do things. So my mum never kind of pressurized me to speak. So when we were outside, I couldn't, so say we were on a bus, I couldn't speak with these other people. So I used to whisper to her because that was the only way I felt like I could communicate with her was whispering. No one could hear my voice. And that was fine. So she let me whisper to her on the bus. She didn't make a big deal out of it or say, no, you should be talking at a normal level. She just let me express myself how I felt I could in every situation. So if we had met up with her friends, that was really difficult for me because even though I had known these people for years and years, we'd go to my mum's friend's house and I could not say a word to her friend. And that was fine. Her friend didn't mention anything. My mum didn't mention anything. They would just be chatting away and I would just be in the background. And there was no kind of pressure to speak. So that kind of made me feel like everything's okay. But then when you get into another situation like school, that's where I found it really difficult and the pressure was just kind of like mounting up because there was an expectation and it's the expectation that for me that was part of the problem was where I couldn't get over selective mutism because there was so much expectation to speak that was actually just holding me back and
Yes.
not helpful in any way at all.
Yes, I just want to repeat what you just said. So that expectation and that pressure was part of the problem, and it was actually what was holding you back.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So then I know, because I know you, at some point that switched, right?
Yes.
Um, So, I mean, we could talk a little bit because I know it built up. If you want to talk about that piece too, like when you were 14, 15, or we can switch. It's totally up to you of the moment when things switched and you were able to actually change that. And it's incredible because you completely overcame your condition.
Yeah, so I'll probably go back to when I was 14, 15, and so I had been out of school for around a year and a half, and I was basically being hounded by social services, and they had totally forgotten about school. They weren't trying to find a new school for me, a new placement. School was never mentioned. It was just this focus on there's something wrong. We don't know what's wrong. We need to fix this. She's at heart, she's at risk of severe, significant harm if we don't intervene in some way. And so what happened was my mum had, she knew a friend who was working in a school, and that friend had a word with the headmaster and said, well, we have this child who would like to, she's been out of school for a year and a half. Would you be willing to, take her in? So it was one of those schools where you had to do like an entrance exam to actually get into the school. So that was so nerve-wracking for me because I'd been out of school for like a year and a half with no education. The social services refused to send a tutor to my home so I could do some lessons at home. So I wasn't even getting any kind of homeschool. I had like, I was getting behind in my like maths, English. So I'd done nothing for a year and a half. I had, my social contact had gone down at that point because I wasn't at school. I didn't have, the one friend or two friends that I could speak to in the playground. So that totally disappeared. So I was very kind of isolated at home, and the kind of lack of social services intervention in trying to get me back into a school also wasn't helping the selective mutism, because I was in a worse place than I was when I was at school, because at least I had, my couple of friends I could speak to. I felt safe in the playground. And even though I wasn't talking in the classroom, I had that peer contact of kids my own age. So I didn't have any of that. So when I went to the examination, I was so nervous that I felt like I was so behind. I thought I can't do maths anymore. I don't know how to, because you have to do an English exam, a maths exam. So I kind of went in there and I did it, and I thought they're not going to take me. I'd kind of convinced myself, and but by some miracle, I passed the exam, and the school said, because she's been out of school, we're going to give her a 3-month trial just to see how it goes. And I thought, that is it. That's all I needed was a 3-month trial, and I was so ecstatic to have that, because it was like I knew that I could show my academic potential.
Yes, yeah.
So I got through the trial, and they kept me on. But in the background, the social workers were still kind of chasing me and saying there's something wrong with her. So they were trying to um, take me out of school because they wanted to put me in a psychiatric hospital to have me assessed. So so at that point in my life, I thought, okay, I'm back at school. This is a new start for me, but I was still kind of haunted by key professionals saying, there is something wrong with you. You're not right. Look at the other children aren't like you. So that message was still going on. And, I ended up, they took me to court to try to take me away from, basically to get me out of school, to get me into a psychiatric hospital, and I would have to like move in there and leave my family and my mum. And that felt really traumatic for me because just the thought of it was terrifying, because it's like I wouldn't know how to. I just thought if I'm in a hospital, I would not know how to cope. I just knew I wouldn't know what to do. I would probably deteriorate because of the environment. So, and I knew I just had to keep out of there and do whatever I could to kind of win the case. So, luckily we won and I wasn't taken away. And, you know, the social services had to kind of drop the case. And it was kind of like a moment where you're going through this dramatic thing, and it's like in the school holidays as well. So the case was happening, and I had to have a lawyer, and my mum had to have a lawyer, and you know, you're going through all this legal stuff, and you're trying to go to school, and you know, you're trying to work on this new life. So, and it was after the case, I felt it took a lot of kind of confidence away from me because of everything that I'd gone through, everything that was said, and you know, everything that they write in the reports about you, and you know, saying that I'm doing it deliberately and that I'm being manipulative and I'm powerful in some way. And I'm thinking, how am I powerful? Like, I'm just a child, you know, that doesn't speak in school, and they've made it into such a big thing that it just, like, that affected me. Except I didn't know how much until I kind of grew up a bit, and then I kind of looked back and thought, wow, that was such a big kind of time in my life. And the fact that I, you know, I kind of, when they were out of my life and when I finished school, and I just found that, you know, I still had selective mutism and I wasn't speaking. Like, for example, in a shop, I'd go to a shop and I couldn't say thank you. I couldn't, if I needed to change a dress, I couldn't go to the shop person and say, I need this size. Can you give me a refund? Anything like that. I had to get someone else to do that. So you get a lot of kind of judgment around, like, people look at you and they think you're rude because you're not speaking, because you're not saying thank you, you're not being polite. So yes, so it's just a hard kind of place to be in. And also you know, getting jobs. So going to an interview, I couldn't do that. That was terrifying because I couldn't speak to people, you know, and it was like, so I ended up, I was out of school. I'd got my qualifications and I couldn't get a job because I couldn't get through the
Do you mean
interview
out of
process.
high school or out of college?
Um,
That does.
well, I started college, so I got my qualifications after high school, right? And I'd got my qualifications, and then I went to college, but I didn't continue with college because I was also getting problems with me not speaking. So it was started to become an issue again. And I thought, you know what, for my own happiness and sanity, I need to just drop out. Like, I wasn't afraid to just be like, you know, I need to end this. I need to walk away and go somewhere else, do something else.
Mhm.
So at that point, I didn't have my A levels to get into university. So I couldn't go to university. So I was just unemployed. I was in this course. There was a to find work. So you kind of go in and they give you computer training. So I was there, and I remember going through like a newspaper, and I saw it was like an advertisement for a evening class for a university like evening course that if you passed, it was like a year course, if you passed and you got like over 60% in the final exams, you could get a place at university. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Like, so I need to apply. And I just felt so excited about it because I thought, well, I don't have the qualifications, but this would get me the qualification to go to university. And I could like totally turn my life around and move on with my education. And so I remember like I was um, at the unemployment course center and I was like in secret, I was kind of using their computers to type up a little, it was like a film review. You had to write a 500-word film review.
And
And
just to
then,
clarify, at this point, you're still selective mutism, not talking.
yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. So I still have selective mutism. And yes, so I'm not speaking or finding it very, I'm very limited on a very, like, if I push myself, I can, like, say a few words to people, but not everyone. Like, I think it's, yes, so it was very, I was still very affected by it, but I was still feeling like, well, this is me, this is who I am right now. So it, I was just in acceptance of who I was. So I applied for this evening course, and I remember I got a letter back saying I had an interview, and I was like, "This is great! I've got an interview." And I remember being on the bus and thinking, "I can't get off this bus." I was terrified. I thought, I'm facing an interview situation. They're going to be asking me questions, so I had memorized literally one line because I figured, well, she's gonna ask, they're going to ask me something about, because it was like a media course. So they're going to ask me something about media. So if I have a prepared line that I can somehow get out to them to show that, I know a little bit on the subject, but I knew that I wasn't really going to be speaking, I'd be fine. So I memorized this like one line and I was on the bus and the bus was approaching the stop. And I just remember it was that moment of, do I stay on or do I get off this bus? And it was so close and I got off the bus. So I ended up in the room with the tutor of this course and I didn't say a lot to her. I said that one line,
What
but
was
it
the
was
line? Do you remember?
I think she asked me what is media, and I think I said it's a global communication tool, and that was it. Like, and yeah, so I was in my kind of early 20s, so kind of memorizing a line was kind of like it was really hard work. So I had to kind of say it over and over and over again, and then try to kind of get it out. But it was like with the anxiety kind of building at the same time. And I didn't know, was I going to shut down? Was I not going to be able to just say that one thing that I wanted to say? So it was just so, it's like you just don't know. But I think because she was such a nice person, I think that's why I don't know, there was just something about her. And it was like she didn't kind of ask me too many things. It was like there was kind of, I just felt like there was an acceptance that I wasn't saying that much, and she didn't push me to say more than I could. So, and at the end, I thought, that's it, I've blown it. I have not, I was really having difficulty because, I'm sure other people in the same position would be kind of talking and talking and trying to get a place on this course, and there's me with my one line, and I thought, that's it, I haven't got in. And but it was basically after the interview, she says, you know what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a chance. And she said, I'm going to let you on the course. And it's like, you start next Monday night. And it was just like, I literally couldn't believe it that I had the place on this course. And I was just, and I remember walking out and thinking, wow, I've done it. You know, and so I started the course. It was like an evening class. And I used to sit in the front row. I never said a word. And she didn't like bug me or pester me or ask me anything or, you know, she just left me. And I thought, this is like my ideal situation. I was always dreaming when I was a child, I always thought, oh, if only there was a place where people wouldn't keep like pressuring me and I could just be myself. And if I couldn't talk, then I could just be who I am and just be me. And I just remember walking into this space, and week after week, she was exactly the same. She didn't ask me anything. She didn't pressurize me. She just let me sit in silence and listen to the class and take my notes. And she didn't like pick on me to be like, do you know the answer to this? Or what's the answer to that? Or, you know, can you say a few words? Like, she didn't do none of that. And it was like a revelation because I had never met anyone who treated me like that in my whole existence, you know, apart from my mum.
So when the pressure was off, that's how it felt. Wow. Now I have a question. We actually didn't talk about this the very first time you told me your story, but it's something that I just thought. As a caregiver, I feel like my emotional state, when I'm with a child, that child can read and feel it. I don't know if I can explain that in words, but when I'm comfortable, when I'm feeling loving, compassion, accepting, that child knows it, even if I don't say anything. And in the same way, like there were times, especially in my early years working with children when they were very aggressive and intense, there are times that I might have been scared, and that child sensed that, right? So do you feel like when you were in the presence of this teacher, can we give her a name so we know, like
Oh, Linda.
Linda? So when you were with Linda, did you, was there a way that you could sense that even in her emotional state, she had a sense of compassion and acceptance and love for you?
That's very interesting you say that because I had that ability from a very young age to pick up on that. And I think because I couldn't speak, I kept that intuition. So that actually came with me when I grew up and when I was in my early 20s. It stayed with me because, you know, usually people get to know each other by speaking to each other, and that's how they find things out. I didn't have that ability, and I literally had to kind of feel my way through. So it was that intuition of I could literally feel other people. So their negativity, their positivity, and that's kind of what I used, whether I was in that space of trust, could I get a word out to them or not? You know, how the anxiety was kind of very, would it be like really heightened with this person or, you know, not as heightened? So, but when I was around her, I did sense that there was a caring and she was just very like interested in me, but in a way that it was like she was, it was almost like she was helping me and doing all the right things to get me out of selective mutism, but neither of one of us knew what was actually happening. But the fact that we found each other and that she was actually helping me through to get to the other side where now I can like talk to everyone. It's like she started off with, you know, I'd go for tutorials and she'd talk to me and you know, and I did feel that connection with her and my anxiety was kind of slowly lowering around her. And then it was like over the time I was able to kind of speak to her more alone, just the two of us. And, you know, and then I went into my, so after the exam, so basically on the day of the exam, she came to the university and she actually stayed with us, while we done the exam, made sure, she kind of made sure we we're all okay. And we went in there with confidence and, and I passed the exam with 76%. So I got a place in the university. And Linda, she put me into her class. So she was teaching in the first year. So I was in her um, classes for the seminar classes. And again, she just left me alone. She didn't pick on me. She would kind of, tell other tutors just to, just leave me be. And just being in that low, there was no pressure. It was a no pressure environment. Slowly, I was able to speak more. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight. It was over the course of the years I was at university, and it was a gradual process that even I didn't see. So it's, if you imagine like a small circle, and who I could speak to comfortably was a little group in this small circle. And what Linda did by kind of taking the pressure away, she kind of widened the circle. So I could talk to a few people and then a few more people. And then by the end of, like, I was at university for the 1 year on the evening class and then another 3 years. So 4 years in total of being treated like that and accepted and not being pressurized to speak and being praised for my academic writing ability, which is what I always wanted. And no one ever mentioning, oh, you're not speaking and you're not answering questions. And after the 4 years, I literally became a butterfly. I was talking more and more. I didn't even realize that I had changed so much because it was so kind of gradual, but it was being in that environment of having the pressure taken off, having the acceptance, being praised for, the things that you're good at and what you can do. And that's what made all the difference to me. So, and that's really where my journey started. I mean, by the end of 4 years, I thought, that's it. I'm speaking. This is it. It can't get any better, but it does, and it did. So I found myself, I was maybe going to the pub with friends, and I could speak to other people, their friends, as well as my friends. So things like that, like, oh, I couldn't do that before. And, so I ended up going to, like, I would put myself in situations like going to a nightclub. I don't even like nightclubs, but I thought I need to experience this just so I can use my new kind of skills and just to be around people. And if people talk to me, I can talk to them, or even going in the street and asking for the time. And I didn't really want to know the time. It's just because I could ask, excuse me, can you tell me what the time is, please? And I was thinking, like, and for me, it was like a superpower. It was just such a powerful thing to have. It was like and it was just like I was scared of regressing and going backwards. So I would always kind of try and push myself when I felt a bit nervous. You're like, okay, just keep pushing and say a few more words here, or to talk to different people, be in different situations. But I think the most powerful moment for me, having like getting over selective mutism, was when I was basically I was coming home. I was just had some shopping. I'd just come home from the shops, and there was a woman on the corner with a man, and he was holding her by her neck. So he had his arm around her neck, and she was like shouting for help. And she was like, help me, help me. And I was just walking along. And I remember she was saying, I don't know this man. I don't know this man. And I stopped, I put my shopping down, and I turned around and I just shouted at him. I just said, let her go now, or I will call the police. and I held my phone up, and he was like, "It's all right. She's with me. You know, she's my girlfriend." And she was like, "I don't know him. I don't know him." And it was like I could not walk away in that situation. And it was like, and I just always think back to that moment, and I think if I had selective mutism in that moment, I would not have been able to have intervened and saved that girl's life. She was like a because I don't know what would have happened to her if I just carried on walking or if I didn't do anything. And she was like an exchange student, so she didn't even live around here. She had come from a different country. So, and to be in that situation and to actually to be able to stop a crime taking place just by using my voice and telling him I would call the police. I got my phone out, ready to dial the number. There was kind of a standoff. He kind of looked at me, and I was like, he was very tall and about 6 foot and quite bulky, and but I kind of just stared him out. He ran off. I got the girl, and we kind of ran off round the corner, just tried to knock on some neighbors' doors to get help. But in the meantime, he had kind of double backed, and I was standing on the driveway. So he had come and he had a knife. So he basically, I was held at knife point. He robbed my phone and then he ran away. So I reported that to the police, and they basically said, like, that doesn't happen in your area. Like, everyone would just walk away.
Mhm.
No one would stop. Like, it was very unusual for them to hear that someone had like stopped and shouted at this person and intervened. And because I
Mhm.
just thought, well, wouldn't everyone do that? Because because now I was speaking, and it was just like using my voice for good. And that was the most amazing thing. And and out of that I got a commendation from the Metropolitan Police for bravery. So it was almost like, wow, I've got an award for bravery, for just like shouting at this person to say, let her go. And it was just incredible, just the power of your voice. And I think a lot of people kind of, because people that have been talking all of their lives, you don't really appreciate what you have. It's almost like it's taken for granted. For me, it's never been taken for granted. Like, me talking to you right now is like the most amazing thing.
I know, it is incredible. Wow. Um, so I want to bring you back to Linda because there are so many things that you said about Linda that were incredible. So even though Linda had this great sense of acceptance and interest and genuine love for you, because she didn't have to do all of those things, but she chose to. She also helped you with growing. So it's not that she
Yeah.
says, I'm going to leave this child alone and I'm not going to give her an opportunity to grow and learn. She actually really helped you to the point that you were able to go to college and get a degree and do the things that you were really passionate about. So what was the fine line where Linda pushed you? Because in some ways she might have, I don't know if the word is push, but encouraged you. But she also had that acceptance. And I'm just aware of the time. It is 9:50, so you have to go in 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just aware of the time. But because now I'm thinking parents and caregivers are going to be listening to this and they want to find that fine line of how to be with their children where they are not judging, obviously, where they're accepting and they're feeling loving and encouraging of their children. But then what's the fine line to know, like, when to push and when to say, you're okay, you don't need to do this?
Um, I think with Linda, it was like she would have me in her office, and it was just like, I'm here whenever you want to come to my office to speak to me, you can come. So there was no, even that, there was no pressure to, you need to be in my office to speak to me. It was almost like she let me make the choice of I can do this if I want to. And so I'd go to her office, and then it was like the more I went to her office, the more I could open up to her. And then she, became a part of that circle, and so I'll be there like every week. And sometimes I'll be going for no reason. There was no reason. I'll just put my name on the door and we'll just chat about it. Wasn't even like study related, just how was my day. So there was no pressure to kind of do anything, but just having the option to.
Yes, yes, yes. And I guess you had her full acceptance. There was no judgment there. And it sounded like until that point, a lot of caregivers and social workers, there was a judgment. They would say there's something wrong with this child, right? So when that was lifted, you were free to be yourself. It looked like we might. Did you freeze, Delicia? Oh, I think you froze. Oh, you're back. You froze just for
Yeah.
a short moment. Is there anything else that you want to share that you think might help parents help their children, and especially help the children? Because even if it's not selective mutism, maybe a child who's dealing with autism, or a child who's dealing with a different diagnosis, or even a child that doesn't have a diagnosis, right? Uh, when we can show up in a certain way to our kids, knowing they're doing the best that they can, and that their coping mechanism might be different than another child's coping mechanism, it's so huge. But are there other things you want to say and that you want to share?
I think it's just to stay encouraging, just always be encouraging, and to be accepting of, where the child is in that moment in time. And only because they're not there yet, it doesn't mean that they won't get there. So it's about not focusing on the end result or where you want to be. It's kind of more focusing on your journey to get there. Because if you're too focused on, you want a certain thing, you want your child to be a certain way, then your mind and your headspace is always going to be there, and you're basically missing what is going on in front of your eyes, and the small little steps that are happening and that you might not be noticing because you're so kind of fixated on like that you're not at the end goal yet. So
Yes, yes, that's so precious. All the things you're saying. Maybe one day we can talk to Linda too, if you're still in touch with her and if she's open. And there was one last thing I wanted to say. Now I forgot. So it's okay because we're coming to the end of this anyway. But I'm thinking that we might want to do more of these if you're open to it. And if you want to do one time with Linda, where we can kind of go deeper into how caregivers can be with their children. And yes. Oh, I just remember. So when each child can have one person that believes in them, it's the belief. So one thing that also stands out from what you're describing is that Linda believed in your potential. So
yes,
even though
definitely.
she didn't see it in that moment, she believed. And it might be something that it was the opposite, actually, of what you had been treated into that point outside of your home. And I can't help to think of what could have happened if they had taken you from the one environment where you felt safe, which was the home environment, right? And then basically all of what they were thinking was going to happen would probably have happened, but not because that was your condition. Like they were thinking there's something wrong with her, she has a severe mental condition, but you probably might have had a mental breakdown, and they probably would have medicated you and said, here, this is what we said was going to happen, and here it is. But when we have that one person that believes in our children's and our children's ability to grow, that's sometimes all it takes. I mean, you had your mom and you had Linda, and you had yourself, because I
Yeah.
do want to say that there is a huge piece, which is your own belief in your ability to do this, the moment you decide to get off that bus was also huge because you could have
Yes,
said, forget about it, but you wanted to grow. Um,
yes.
and
And it
you're a
was really
hero.
scary kind of getting off the bus, but that was the moment that actually changed my life. And basically, I have proved all those professionals wrong. You know, all those people that saw me as there's something wrong with her. She's not going to progress in the future. Where's she going to end up? And I'm just fine. You know, I have a first class honours degree, which is the top degree that you can get in this country. Like I got a scholarship to go to China and learn Mandarin as part of the university. So I have really progressed with my speaking and I've developed so much. And the thing is, it's like I look back at the person that I was with selective mutism and how all those kind of professionals, they didn't help me at all. They basically hindered my progress and kept me in that space. And because they didn't believe in me, because they were putting judgment on me, because they wanted me to be different to who I was, and they weren't accepting, they didn't accept who I was in that moment. You know, they were very judgmental, they thought they knew best, you know, and they compared me to every other child. And I think that's where they went wrong because they had no understanding, no compassion of what was kind of going on for me, or, you know, they didn't have any of that. And if they had succeeded in putting me in a psychiatric hospital, my life could have, you know, as you said, gone in a totally different direction because that was not the appropriate treatment at all. And what Linda gave me was actually, in a way, it was treatment. And I remember when there was a documentary on TV, and I remember it was about selective mutism, and I watched it, and I literally cried because it was like looking in the mirror. It was about children with selective mutism, and all the symptoms were there. Everything that I was experiencing, those children were experiencing. And I actually could put a name to what I was actually going through and living through. So in my mid-20s, I was like, I ran into Linda's office and I was like, I know what it is. I saw this documentary. I've got selective mutism. That's what it was, you know, and just being able to give it a label and looking at how, you know, it would have been treated is not sending you to a psychiatric hospital and taking you away from your parents. You know, that is not the course of action. So, you know, and I feel really kind of lucky to, you know, have this opportunity to kind of speak to you today about kind of everything that's happened, because I guess it's something that I didn't speak about for a long time because I just felt it was kind of like this big secret and you can't talk about it, and especially when you're going through the court case and it's everything's a secret and no one can know. And so now I can, and also being able to speak out when it was always social workers kind of saying their piece or saying this about me and that about me. And now, you know, I can actually tell my story. And, you know, the one day where I actually, like years later, after all this happened to me, I think I told you previously, where I was stopped in the supermarket by someone who she said to me, "Oh, do you remember me?" And I said no, and she said, "Oh, remember I was your social worker way back." And the thing is, I looked at her and I literally had erased her face from my memory. And she was one of the social workers that had written that I was manipulative and powerful, and she had written, you know, some lies in her report to kind of boost the case up. And I remember seeing her and just being in shock that after all these years, I'm face to face with her, and I have recovered from selective mutism. And it was my moment to say to her, why did you lie in your reports? It was something I wanted to say way back when she was writing these things about me, you know, because she had come to my house one day and she said I had climbed into a wardrobe, which did not happen. And she wrote that in her report. And I couldn't defend myself because I wasn't speaking. So professionals can write what they want to boost their reports and to make me look like I have problems. And I said to her, I'm standing there saying, why did you lie in your report? And she just said, oh, I don't remember that. And I'm thinking, well, you remember my face from over 10 years ago now, but you don't remember what you said and what you did. And I just thought it was kind of an unlikely story. But I said to her, you know, the disorder that I had was selective mutism. And if you ever come across anyone like me, this like with the symptoms that I was exhibiting, that's what it is, you know. And if you know anyone, you know, just spread the word. That's what it is. It's selective mutism, you know. So I basically educated her in that moment and then kind of had to throw in that I have a first class honours degree and you know I'm speaking now and you know I went to China and I've been learning Mandarin and you know just all my achievements kind of came out. And then you know when I left her I just said, if you ever see me again, just don't say hello. And then I walked away and I cried in the in another aisle because it was just so much emotion just seeing this person again, and it just takes you back to all the bad times and all the kind of all the power that these professionals have. And it's kind of they make a choice whether they use it wisely or they use it in a way that is harmful to you. I mean, back then I think they could get away with it more. I think now it's more kind of think people are kind of you know more aware of selective mutism and you can't get away with what you could get away with years ago, but their behavior was just you know not acceptable. And to be able to actually tell her in my own words using my voice, that was just the most powerful thing that I could do, because it was like I thought I would never see these people again, you know. And it was just a moment to kind of have my say and to say, look at me now and look where you thought I would be without your help. And I didn't have your help and I'm totally fine. So that was like the best moment for me. And, you know, from there, I just kind of grew and grew and grew. And, you know, so to the point where now I can talk to anyone and everyone.
And so well. Oh my gosh, you're incredible, Delicia. You're really, really a hero. And thank you. Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you.
I am aware you have to go pick up your daughter from school. So I won't hold you anymore, but thank you for sharing your story. I know that many people out there will benefit from hearing your story. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.